Our current sex education programs in the United States are not effective in teaching people about sex, but rather focuses on abstinence, shame, and often lack integration and inclusion in same-sex relationships, as well as reinforce gender roles and stereotypes. Currently, problems we see in sex education can also be seen in everyday classrooms and interactions. Currently, classrooms are encouraging heteronormativity, which can be defined as denoting or relating to a worldview that promotes heterosexuality as the normal or preferred sexual orientation. Martin and Kazik's study focus on the existence of heteronormativity everywhere, including children's G-rated films. In their article, Martin and Kazik discuss how a certain type of imagery that constructs a type of specialness of heteroromantic love by implying that the only type of intense and special love is in heterosexual relationships. In Ganson's article, they talk about sexuality in preschools, where teachers would encourage students who seemed like they had a crush on each other to be boyfriend and girlfriend and even kiss. The teachers, however, didn't have the same reaction when it was two boys or two girls. When Ganson observed the classroom in their study, they found many instances of heteronormative sexual socialization. In the sex education system, teachers limit their students by inferring that heterosexuality is the only type of sexual interaction.
For many years, sex education has been very abstinence-only based, meaning that students aren't taught about contraceptives, condoms, STDs, or how to have safe sex. They are only taught that they shouldn't be having sex at all. Garcia's article revealed that the reasons any of these topics are brought up in the classroom is to shed a negative light on premarital sex. Garcia makes mention that sexual education is a method used for educators to promote the sexual innocence of youth. Even in schools that do have more focus on comprehensive sex education, depending on race and gender, students can still experience the class differently and be taught different from others. Harwood states that the LGBT plus youth are surrounded and all about woundedness. Examples of this would be homelessness, drug abuse, HIV and AIDS, suicide, and violence. These are what they call wounded truths because they are some of the truths of this population. However, they are not seen through a lens. They are seen through a lens that creates woundedness and reflects it onto the community as a whole.
When in classrooms or social situations, even though abstinence is taught, gender roles and stereotypes that would traditionally fit into a heterosexual situation are still encouraged. Gender roles and stereotypes are used in a way to put people in a box. Group addresses how the party scene creates a unique environment where sexuality is expressed in many forms. They talk about how girls interact in same-sex actions can still be deemed as heteronormative. These interactions are deemed as okay because they benefit men's gaze. The same-sex interactions allow women to appear more heterosexually appealing, which makes the interaction more acceptable. This also brings to light how women's sexuality is more fluid while men have a more fixed sexual orientation. These ideas are portrayed in the classroom during sex education by reinforcing gender roles, which makes students feel as though they need to act a certain way to fit in. In current sex education programs, although both boys and girls are encouraged to openly discuss and ask questions regarding sex and sexual health, girls are often punished or shamed for being too interested in sex. This reinforces the belief that men are the only ones who are supposed to desire sex and plays into the idea that even from childhood, a woman's purpose is only to be sexually desired by men and not to be interested in sex themselves. After discussing the current issues with the sex education system in the United States, there are specific solutions that can help make changes for the future system.
The first way we can improve our current sex education programs in the U.S. is by teaching students the importance of consent when it comes to sexual relationships. Ganson addresses how teachers tend to have outdated training that leads them to encouraging heteronormativity and suppressing sexuality outside of that. With this idea comes some heteronormative rules in the classroom. In order to instill the importance of consent, students should be taught at a young age that touching someone of the same or a different gender in any way without their consent is wrong. If consequences for non-consensual acts start at a young age, then students, as they grow up, will know the importance of consent and take that information into sexual relationships. The idea of consent is vital in order to create a safe space for men and women as they begin to engage in sexual relationships. Rape has become a serious issue that a large portion of women have to deal with. Marcus critiques current conceptions of rape and concluded that they come from the idea of gender. Rape is presented as an inevitable event, but instead, the sex education programs need to inform students about the moral wrongness and consequences of rape. If students are shown how seriously rape can affect someone's life, they can be more conscious how their actions towards a sexual partner can be consensual at all times.
The second way we can improve our current sex education program in the US is to be more inclusive when it comes to relationships, gender identities, and sexuality outside of heterosexuality and heteronormativity. Schultz and Westbrook introduced the process of viewing gender and how this process and sexual identities reaffirm the heteronormative assumption that only opposite sex attraction between two differently sexed and gendered bodies is normal. This belief about gender places men and women in different categories and classifies them as being opposite. Curriculum should be focused on how we can celebrate these differences rather than use them as a way to divide us and make people who are not heteronormative feel that they are opposite. Going along with the idea of opposites, our language instills this idea because many relationship terms are heteronormative and monogamous. Ritchie and Barker argue that language is a social structure that shapes sexuality. In the United States, the social default for language that is related to relationship is a monogamous heterosexual relationship. Not all people are heterosexual and monogamous, therefore sex education should reflect that by exploring sexuality as a fluid concept. The classroom lesson plan should include real-world examples of the many other types of sex and sexualities. Once students see how sex can happen in many forms, they can feel more accepted, which would encourage more people to explore their sexuality at a deeper level.
Lastly, we believe that a total reconstruction of our sex education systems in the U.S. is the only way we can improve it. Rather than continuing to teach the same old and archaic abstinence-only curriculum, we propose that instead sex education programs be focused on peer-led discussions where a safe environment is promoted. The goal of this is to let students openly discuss their personal experiences with sex and sexual health in a way that is educational for them as well as their peers. Supporting children who are curious and want to engage in sexual activity in the future need to know that if they have concerns, they can openly discuss them without the fear of being punished, judged, or degraded.